In this knife talk video, we're looking at the Great Eastern Cutlery Tidioute number 46 Whaler in muscle bone. And this is, the first thing you notice about this knife is that it's just really big. It's almost comically big. It's very, pretty heavy, and the main blade here sticks out like an inch or over an inch probably. So it's a very kind of striking knife that kind of catches your eye right away just because it's so different. There's nothing really like it being made now, other than the inverse of this pattern from Great Eastern Cutlery, which is their number 45 Lumberjack, which I do have one. I have one from the Rendezvous 2016, but unfortunately it had an issue where it was kind of catching the tang here was kind of catching on the liner and making it difficult to open, not because the spring or the pull was hard, but because it was catching. So it's actually at Great Eastern Cutlery at the factory right now, and Bill Howard's going to take a look at it. They have great service. That's something that I don't know how much I've mentioned that, but that's one thing. I mean, there are people who are craftsmen, and they really do stand behind the products that they make. They believe in them, and if there's something that's a real issue, that's something that's making your knife not work or shouldn't be happening, they will fix it. They've fixed some other things. I had a knife handle crack. That it was a knife that hadn't been used. It was in the tube. They fixed that, and it's just, I think it's worth mentioning that if you have an issue, a manufacturing issue with a GEC knife, they will, help you out. And just in general too, kind of on that point, it's worth it if you have questions or a problem or something, it's worth giving them a call. They're generally just like nice people who like knives and like to make these nice knives. So, don't be afraid to give them a call and see if they can help you out if you have a problem with a knife or something like that. And I always, if you're in the area, if you're in the Titusville, Franklin, northwestern Pennsylvania area, by all means try to stop in and take the factory tour. It's really eye-opening, shows you how much goes into making knives like this, especially the way they do it. It's all hand done. There's really no automated processes at all. Even the etching they do, they use a etching machine, but they do it by hand and everything. So just wanted to mention that with this. I wish that I had my 45 Lumberjack to compare this to, but basically it has a spear point main blade too. It's a little bit less big than this one actually, but you can imagine a spear point on this side rather than this side. But with that said, this is a, and the Lumberjack that I have is also muscle bone. It's actually Pioneer muscle bone, which I'm not exactly sure what the difference is. It looks relatively similar to this. It actually might have a little bit more like dips and stuff, but I really wanted to have it with this knife to compare it to, but it just didn't work out. But with that said, this is a multi-blade knife, meaning that it has more than one blade, obviously, but a jack, which can have more than one blade, has all of the blades on the same side. And a multi-blade knife has them on opposite ends. So you can see that the main blade here, the spear point, is on the larger end, and you can see that it's pinchable, easy to pinch open. No real difficulty with that, and the spring tension isn't really too strong on this. I mean, it has good snap. You can see it snaps closed and it snaps open, and that was me using the long pull there. So good spring action. Definitely not too light at all. I'd put it at like a 6, maybe 6.5 or 7, but probably more like a 6. And that'll definitely be true. I haven't put any WD-40 or anything like that, which is what GEC has suggested to me to use as lubricant in the pivots of their knives. Haven't put anything or cleaned it out or anything in there yet, so it'll just get smoother once you carry it and use it and open and close it. But really smooth, or not, I guess it's not super smooth right now, but it's not too tough to open. Like I say, it's probably around a 6.5 right now with good snap, open and closed. So that's the main blade, and then looking at the main blade here, you can see that it's this really tall, you know, fat, not thick, because I'll talk about that here in a second, but tall, kind of modified spear point. Because it is so tall in this direction, it almost has like, kind of looks like, if you could only see, if it was only here, it would look like a sheep foot, right? With this kind of sloping shoulder. But then, you know, it has kind of a lot of belly there because it is a really tall blade. But with that said, you know, it's not a thick blade. If you see here at the spine, they've ground it down a lot, and part of that is so that they can fit both blades in, right? So when you close it here, you see that it's ground more on the side that the secondary sits on than it is on the other side, and that's to help let that secondary sit in without it, you know, rubbing against the main blade. With that, it's very, very thinly ground. So it's hard to show this on camera, but if you look at that, that's a thin edge. That's going to slice really well, and I think it's even thinner than my Lumberjack. And one of the things that I really like about the Lumberjack is that because it does have a wide spear point blade, it's actually a little bit less wide than this one. It's a little different of a blade shape, but because it comes down to such a thin edge, because it's such a tall blade, they actually slice really well. I've used the Lumberjack for food prep a lot, like cutting potatoes and tomatoes and things like that. So, you know, if you buy this knife to use it, which I think very few people probably who bought this knife plan to use it, because it is so big, and it also turned out to be rare, which I'll talk about later. If you do plan to use it, this blade will be a pretty useful blade, I think. Now, kind of moving on to the secondary blade here. And this is something that people brought up, but it's very, very strong pull. It's the strongest pull I think that I've ever had on any knife. And you know, Gradation Cutlery has strong pulls, but it's the strongest I think I've felt. So I'm gonna attempt to open it with my thumb nail here, but oh, I could. All right, that's the first time I've been able to do that. Maybe it's smoothing out a little bit, but I would put the pull on this secondary blade as like a 9. So you see that it's openable, but you have to really think about it and you know, do it in a very kind of direct, thoughtful manner to keep it from tearing your nail. So let's see if, yeah, I guess it might be smoothing out a little bit. So, you know, maybe if I put some WD-40 in there and, you know, worked it back and forth a bunch of times, which would, again, be difficult because it is like a 9 right now. It might smooth down to an 8, which an 8 is usable. As it sits right now, I think that it would pretty strongly discourage me from using this knife because, you know, if you're, you know, doing whatever you need to do, like I probably wouldn't use this big main blade to like sharpen a pencil or you know, cut tape on a box. So I'd want to use the secondary blade, but at this point it takes, you know, a lot of concerted effort there to open that up. But I do think the more I'm opening it here, the more it's smoothing out. I don't know how far that'll go, if it will make it down to an 8 on the pull, and if it'll end up being smooth or not. But like I say, really, really strong pull as it came out of the tube. So just to show the tube, that's the tube. It's a really big tube because it's such a, you know, wide knife. But normal Tidioute cutlery branding on the front. It seems like they are doing all printed labels. That's not something that I care about at all. I think if anything, it'll make them easier to read. Not that they were that difficult to read before, but you know, make it so you know exactly what it says for your knife and everything. I don't really have a problem with that. I think some people kind of disliked it, but you know, I think that the secondary blade, you know, if you're able to open it and you know, open it easily enough, it's going to be a useful enough blade. Now, one thing, you're really not going to hold this knife like this while you're using it. I mean, maybe, but you know, because this main blade comes down to a relatively thin spine here, it isn't that comfortable holding it like this, right? So if you're going to use this secondary blade, you're probably going to use kind of a pinch grip like this. And the other thing is, you know, if you were cutting something on you know, like a table or something, you're pretty much only going to be able to get the belly of the spear blade. So this maybe is, if you are going to use it, is more for like cutting tape and things like that. Again, if you're able to get it open. I had this blade key, which for a long time I didn't really understand why anyone would need a blade key. But I got this at a recent meeting of the Allegheny Mountain Knife Collectors Association, also called the Allegheny Mountain Knife Club. So if you're in Western Pennsylvania, especially around the Pittsburgh area, check this out. You can find it on Facebook, or they have a website. The Facebook, I would suggest, is the way to go. Or just contact me. I can tell you about it too. I recently started going to this, and it's pretty cool. You get to see a lot of cool knives. But they gave this to me for free, and that was cool. And I thought I was going to need it to show the secondary blade on this knife. But this is a blade key, so this is for opening if you don't want to get fingerprints on, or if you have a hard time opening it. You put it in the nail nick and then open it. And when I first got this knife and started trying to open it, it was just almost bending this blade key, which I think it's hardened steel. It might just be tempered steel, I'm not sure, but it was bending the blade key, so pretty tough pull. But that's what this is for. That's why I had this out here, but looks like it is smoothing out a little bit. But like I say, not really that ergonomic in this grip, so this is more of a pinch grip if you're going to use this. And then on the other end here for the main blade, this actually feels fine. I don't think that this secondary would bother me at all. Most of your grip is up here. This is almost like a finger choil. It's such a big kick. Kind of acts as a little bit of a guard to keep your finger from moving forward onto the blade. And it feels relatively ergonomic in hand. Now with that said, I'm not sure how much value there is in talking about the ergonomics of this knife. I think some people, a good number of people are going to use this knife. That's actually what I got this for. So speaking of, another reason I brought out the Allegheny Mountain Knife Club blade key is because the Allegheny Mountain Knife Club's club knife for this year is a 46 whaler in LVS abalone. So layered veneer, I forget what the S is, sheets, abalone. So basically abalone, a whole bunch of pieces of abalone layered within a sheet of acrylic and turned into a handle, and they look really great. So I'm getting one of those, and I didn't plan to use that knife really. They're honestly not that much more expensive than these because it's a club knife and everything, but it's gonna look really great, and it's gonna be something where a huge knife like this with a huge sheet of abalone, I'm not sure it's something that I want to use. So I was getting it as a collection piece, and then I was getting this muscle bone as a user. But like I say, I'm not sure that I'm going to keep this knife as a user with the secondary blade being so strong. I still am, planning to keep the abalone one that I'm getting because it's not going to be a user. It's going to be a collection piece. But I'm not sure I'm going to keep this one, being that I plan to get it as a user because it's so strong. But I'm kind of bummed out about it because, like I say, I have the 45 Lumberjack in muscle bone also. So it was going to be kind of a cool little set, right? Like 45 Lumberjack with a spear main and a clip point secondary, and then the 46 whaler with a spear main and a pen secondary. So I really was looking forward to having a nice little set of really big, ridiculously big behemoth users in the whaler and Lumberjack. But like I say, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to keep this one as a user because of that secondary pen blade. So that's something to keep in mind. If you want to get this as a novelty because it is kind of unusual, or as a collection piece, I definitely think that it's great for that. They look really nice. I haven't really found any fit and finish issues. There's no gaps. No cracks or anything like that. No real scratches. Some people said that there were some scratches on their blades. I didn't see that at all in mine. Mine doesn't have any rub either between the blades, and my shield is fitted well. So really as a collection piece, a nice knife. But I'm just not sure there's going to be a user. One cool thing, speaking of something that some people had thought was a finish issue, these all have a Rockwell Hardness Testing like mark there. So when they test the hardness of a knife steel, they use a little punch, and maybe so Peter's Heat Treating in Meadville does the heat treating for Great Eastern Cutlery. And Peters is one of the most well-known and respected heat treating outfits, really anywhere. A lot of custom makers use them and things like that. So these definitely are going to be heat treated well. But I can definitely see how with a blade this big and wide, how they might want to check on each one to make sure that it was hardened how they wanted it to be. So that's kind of an interesting little thing. Not something that I consider an issue at all. Almost, I think it's cool. I mean, it just guarantees that they, got it right and everything. And that kind of brings me, with the talk on this being either a user or a collector, and getting it right and the issues, to the fact that these were a lot rarer than they originally were supposed to be. And the reason for that is there's been some reports and some comments that something like a third of these didn't make it out of production. So they were produced or whatever, but they for whatever reason they had issues that they didn't go to the dealers. So like some of the dealers just didn't get as much as they thought they were by a lot. So some of the reservations didn't come through. People who had reserved them. This one I had reserved and gotten everything. I actually kind of didn't mean to. It's something that I've talked about on other videos. You just kind of see that it's coming up and reserve it. And I meant to buy this through a distributor or dealer, and actually ended up getting a reservation somewhere else. But a lot of the reservations didn't come through. So some people who wanted these didn't get them. And supposedly, at least one of the dealers, even the ones that they did get, they sent back. Now, I think that those comments were actually about the ironwood version of the Whaler, but I think that I don't know that that's true for the muscle bone. Actually, no, that's not true. The dealer who I was going to buy a muscle bone Whaler through actually ended up, they were all reserved, so ahead of time. So it's interesting that they had trouble with these and ended up not being able to make as many as they thought they were going to. Because they had issues, and then even some dealers, the ones that they did get, they sent back some of them. What's interesting about it, one, of course, I'm sure that there's a very difficult pattern to make, being so big, so strong, and everything like that, such a strong spring and everything, and 6 pins on each side and all that. Definitely difficult to make. But like I say, mine, the fit and finish is really nice. This blade has really nice snap, open and close, no rubbing, no gaps, no cracks, no big scratches or anything. The one thing with mine, like I talked about for a while there, is that the pull on this secondary is really, really, really strong. So that's not too bad. Definitely if you're a collector more than a user, it's less of a problem than it is for me, being that I was planning on using this knife. But just something to be aware of, that I think that these are quite a bit rare. The ones that actually made it out into consumers or collectors' hands or whatever, quite a bit rarer than they were planned to be. So might be valuable in the future, and everything like that if you're a collector for that reason. But definitely an interesting knife, even beyond the collector value that it probably will have because of that, just because it is so unique. And I kind of doubt that they will have another run of these that soon, because one, they haven't done one in a long time, and two, they had issues with it, right? So they had trouble producing it and producing the numbers that they planned to. So I'm not sure that they'll make another run of these Whalers, super quickly, after this run. So just something to be aware of, something to think of. And again, definitely an interesting knife, a very unique knife. Generally everything other than that overly strong pull on the secondary, which, you know, maybe if you use this knife and everything and put some WD-40 in there, maybe that would smooth out quite a bit. But generally a nice, interesting, and very unique knife from Great Eastern Cutlery in the Tidioute number 46 Whaler in muscle bone. So if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them. I like to see what everybody has to say about these knives and everything. And I have lots of other videos. I think I have over 70. I have a lot anyway, of 1 minute overviews like I have on this knife. I have one of those up already also. And then also knife talk videos like this, which are a little bit longer and go into more detail and everything like that. You know, go ahead and check those out. And if you'd like to get notifications, don't forget to subscribe. Now, one thing I didn't mention about this knife that I thought I'd mention at the end is that supposedly this pattern was made, and it's kind of the same story behind the Lumberjack, for you know, a person on a boat to, you know, take the knife in their left hand, put it on the real thick, you know, rope that's on boats, and hammer it with, you know, with a mallet on the right hand. Same kind of background was given for the Lumberjack. Now, you know, that might be true. That might be what they were originally made for. I wouldn't be surprised if they were originally made kind of as what they are now too, which is just kind of like a really cool, different knife, and kind of a method to prove the capabilities of the knife maker, the cutler, because it is a difficult knife to make. So kind of cool historic thing if that is true, if they actually were made originally for that. It's very interesting. They must have been cutting some serious rope if they were, you know, needing a knife this tall and everything. But kind of, you know, an interesting historical note to add at the end here. And along with that, if it wasn't really that, if it was more that they were making them because, you know, it's an interesting knife, that's something that I think people sometimes, you know, kind of maybe understand or get wrong, is that people seem to think that nobody collected knives back in kind of the heyday of this type of knife, the, you know, late 19th to early 20th century. That's just not true. There's you know, some cool like writings from catalogs and things about how discerning people were even then about their knives. So it's definitely possible that this pattern was originally made for cutting real big thick ropes for working men like a Lumberjack or a Whaler. But it's also very possible that it was made as a collector piece, which is what it primarily is now also. So just some thoughts on that. I didn't want to make it the focus of the video because you know, it's not super pertinent to this knife itself, but just something interesting. So again, hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to go out and do good.